Good morning. We'll call this special finance committee meeting to order. And we'll say good morning and remind everyone about cell phones, if we can get our cell phones on buzz. We'll have a roll call.
Mr. Vickery.
Present.
Mr. Olthoff.
Present.
Ms. Barber. Mr. Vassar.
Here.
Ms. Campbell.
Present.
Mr. Schlecky. Mr. Lejeff.
Present.
Mr. Lear.
Present.
Mr. Scholl.
Present.
Mr. Stauffenberg. Mr. Washington. Ms. Wilson.
Here.
Mr. Cruz.
Here.
Mr. Stern.
Here.
Quorum present. I've received no requests for public comment. Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move to insurance. Open the bids for insurance. We have the department heads here. For the committee, we'll need a motion to open the bids. Motion by Mr. Scholl, second by Mr. Vassar. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like same. Motion carries.
I'm gonna be done here in a minute. How about you?
I got some witch doctors in my family.
Forgot about that.
George was a witch doctor. Robert straightened up the sidewalk. Out that.
Yeah.
No, I got to do it. I keep it.
Mr. Stauffenberg. I said, Mr. Stauffenberg twice and you didn't answer. I can call you Jim. Huh?
Yeah, you're here.
Yeah. Mr.
I usually stop after 2 times, but
I don't think it's killing time right now, so.
Every time I see it unknown, it comes down the line, I won't answer. One of my customers.
I'm not there anymore. I'm gone. I left June 30th. Did you really? I retired.
I did. I
Yes.
didn't know
I said, I told
either.
everybody
But
the
you
same
stand
old
up
spy
and
is
over
going.
here.
I did do it. Since the spy was down, you know, I cleaned it. Yeah, I did.
We're gonna read the totals on the bids. And then we're gonna refer it to the department. We'll need a motion to do that at the appropriate time. They'll develop a spreadsheet for committee action next week, okay?
We have, for medical, we have 3 bids, 1 a fully insured bid and 2 self-funded options. For dental, we have 3 bids. For life insurance, we have 6. Make that 4 dental.
fire department to do a spreadsheet, so we can bring it back to the finance committee.
You wanna could we get the totals? Is there a way to get the totals?
Sure, absolutely. For the fully insured medical plan that we have personal care. The self-funded option, one of them is from Homestar, which is Sage, and the other one is from EAS. For dental, we have our renewal with Delta Dental. We have a bid from The Guardian, and we have a bid from Cigna. And there was another dental. Standard dental. And then life insurance, we have our renewal from TrueAssure. We have a life insurance quote from Standard, Principal, Hartford, Reliance, and Prudential. Was that 6?
Yep.
I was looking for it.
Got them all? That's all? Mr. Olthoff with a motion to send back to department for spreadsheet. Mr. Scholl with a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like same. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Finance. Steve here?
I'll be right back.
Steve will be right back. Every committee member should have had a copy of the draft appropriation budget for fiscal year 2009. I prefaced the budget by saying, we began this some months ago, and as all of you know, it's not easy to project revenues or costs out in that 18-month till the end of the year. So we spend about 6 months in preparation, pass the budget. So there's about an 18-month window where we try to forecast both revenues and expenses. And there's been quite some volatility in both revenue and expense. Some of the expenses we've seen decline slightly when we look at the gas prices and know that we've got quite a few of the sheriff's cars running around out there. Morning, Steve. Morning. As you know, we put this meeting together to meet the constraints for publication, public review of the budget before it's passed by the full county board. So we'll need to pass this document today.
Just for clarifications, last month we handed out the draft budget in a green cover. We just want to make sure that you're looking at a yellow cover because of the updates from last month to this month, so I just wanted to make sure we're all looking at the same book here, making sure, because there was another copy out there, so. Quickly, just some update information in the loose paper that you received first. The one we looked at before is kind of an update. Updated the numbers was the general fund analysis, the activity summary that has the non-grant, the grant, and the inmate rental activities. This is an actual revenue, actual expense, you know, and then projected out on averages at this point. You know, to just give you a big picture look at everything happening, and where the fiscal year may end up, the potential to end up, give or take. And so, and as you can see, if you look through like the non-grant area and the grant area of both revenue and expense, you can see where things have been tight. You can see department heads have done an outstanding job cutting back as far as, just big picture totals are concerned. You can see changes in grant activity, and then as everything pulls together all in the same with as far as the inmate activity as well. So without going a lot of detail, this is a very big picture look as we dive into specific revenues, and department budgets, how everything rolls through every department and where it rolls through. This is probably the easiest way I can try to explain, how all the ins and the outs and what they're for, how it transacts, how it has transacted, and how this year appears to be doing at this point. So, if there's any questions on that or not.
Anybody have any questions for Steve on the overview and on the latest numbers that are before you?
I think, with the negative 368,000 number there, which is the total of non-grant and grant activity, kind of outlines why why, as far as departmental wise, why things are tight, with watching, general activity in that range. And then we obviously are using some of the inmate activity, and trying to balance everything out. So that just gives a picture of, kind of the balance and why, we've struggled with potential cuts and being level and, all the things that we've done here over the last number of months, discussion. So just kind of brings that picture back to mind as far as, how the big picture's rolling. So, any other questions with that?
The 368,000, that represents a little over 1%.
Approximately, yeah.
A little over 1% of the general fund budget. General fund budget is $32 million. So, just a projection, if we continue to tighten our belts, what we may get there. Last year, as you recall, we ended up about 174,000 negative, which is about 0.5% of general fund.
If there's no other questions there, the next page has a front and a back. One side is income tax, the other side is sales tax. They're very similar as far as the structure. It just gives a history and a current activity, for both of those as far as where we're at year to date as compared to where we've been in prior years. I'll try to keep you updated on this. This is just bringing you up to speed on the latest information that I have. We'll continue to look at that, but income tax might be one that fluctuates. It might hit us, maybe next year, depending on how all this rolls out with the state economy as it is. So I think these two are very much economically run, and we'll have to wait and see, and continue to watch that. So I wanted to pass that out. Mr. Bosser asked for an income tax, breakout similar to the sales tax, so we use the same format to do that, and we'll keep an eye on that as we go forward.
Any questions on the two reports before you? Yes, Ms. Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're just looking at these reports right now. As far as with the income tax analysis, how many, are they 2 months behind here?
Yeah, the August was the last month we received, so, I mean, that's pretty average where we're at right now, you know, as far as timing wise.
Do we have any projections for fiscal year '08?
09, you mean? or-
I'm sorry, no, '09?
Yeah, that's in the detailed revenue that we'll be hitting here in a second. We took averages, you know what I mean, and then just put a small percentage as far as what has been happening, you know, and it's very conservative is how we went forward with it.
Is the sales tax analysis before or after TIFs? Does that take enterprise or TIFs or anything like that into account? Because some of that TIF money, isn't that diverted with sales taxes?
Well, yeah, this is what we receive, so I would assume it's after.
It's actually what we get.
Yeah, I'll get in all that detail, yeah.
It's not what's generated, it's what we receive.
Received, yeah. All right, no other questions there. We'll head into the actual budget book. Start with the general fund first. Special fund. Do it that way. Okay, just the very first section is the summary, general fund summary. Again, before we get all the detail, there's a big picture. Now this is, the first report I showed you was actual revenue, actual expense and trends. Now this is more of a budgetary look at things, although the detail is there. But as far as what all the details in the total budget that is before you, it's balanced at $32,281,616, represents an increase of $178,862 from the fiscal year 2008 budget. So as you can see, it's 0.5% change, so very little in that amount of money as far as in total dollars. As far as what we're about ready to look at it in more detail, but that's a big picture look at it as far as what's here before you. Any questions there? Questions? The next section is all the detailed revenues. I don't know, Ann, to answer your first question there on the income tax, you can see where 09 is at this point. And what we're budgeting is very conservative as far as what things are going on. It's a small percentage increase overall. And then, yeah, as the committee has looked at, you know, over the last, on the revenue, we've looked at this, I believe, since June with updated information coming across with averages. Some have dropped since June, others have stayed the same. Within the last month, I went in and I just tried to update year-to-dates and averages, and it really didn't change a whole lot. So, you know, the numbers are pretty much the same as far as those we went down. So, if there's any other specific questions, I don't know how we just go through this, or I don't know, you know, if you want to continue
Any
to
questions
dive
on
into
the first
anything
page of
specific
the
or
general
not.
fund revenue worksheet?
This is every revenue of the general fund by department, you know, where the activity happens. So, total increase was 178,000. It could be different by department. You know, yeah, as you'll see, some department totals are different, you know, as we go through. But in total, because we have some that have decreased, you know, that's a net of $178,000 in total. So this gives you an idea of, you know, who's going up, who's going down. You know, as far as the trend activity with the current, you know, economic local situation and state or, you know, federal related, depending on, you know, where it comes from.
Yes, Ms. Clausen.
Steve, you might point out what the change was from last month. We we spent some time looking at this over the last few months, but, at last month's meeting, there was a piece of information came in late.
Oh, yes, thank you.
And basically, that's the only change I see.
Yeah, that, it was in, excuse me, probation, which is, page 4 of the 5 pages, which might be on front page there, for you guys, your front and back, try to save paper there. It's in probation, the GIA, salary, the grant and aid salary reimbursement, had been decreasing, and I calculated another decrease as the state, and, this one comes in very close to the timing of this budget, and, well, as of last month, Rick handed it to me the day of the meeting. So at least with the extension here, I was able to plug it in. It actually was an increase from prior years. So that's one of the first increases that that particular line in that particular operation from the state has had in probably 3 years at this point. So we plugged that in from that specific information. So other than that, as far as trend-wise, yeah, that was about the only thing different. I know the sheriff is shared, you know, what the year in may be with the rentals. I believe I'm low as far as the projection on that, and obviously we're staying low on the budgeted portion of that. You know, obviously that can change. It's doing great right now. You know, you know, obviously there's different governments and different levels. You know, a time of year and things like that. Obviously, it has a fluctuation to it with as far as bed rentals. So we're staying down. There are some funds. This number will not match up specifically in the sheriff reports because there are now monies also from the inmate rental going to reimburse pension funds. So it will have to pick up, and we'll see that number when we get to the special funds underneath the pension. Those two numbers added together will add up to what the sheriff has been communicating, but now you're going to see a little bit of difference from, it's in two different spots now as far as that revenue. So just you know, an update on that, with those transactions there. So. This also, there's been an application with the federal marshals as far as you know, an increase in bed rental rate. We've gone 3 years now, so this does not reflect anything there. So if that comes through, that'll be, you know, an additional amount that at this point won't be budgeted because of the timing issues of knowing if that comes through or not. So,
Ms. Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on the revenues. On the page for the public defender and the sheriff non-grant. It says 2000, at the bottom of the page for sheriff non-grant, it says 2008 year to date is 240,000, but there's a projection for 722,000. And this is, what, as of 3/4 of the year, at this projection? This is dated October 24th, 2008. Isn't that kind of a big revenue gap? And is it going to be not, are the projections accurate on that?
The total
year to date didn't add up right. I'm sorry.
All right, so.
We look at this numerous times and we missed that. That's not adding up right. The year to date is not correct. Because one line's higher than the total. I'm
Right.
sorry. That's a typo on our part.
Okay, the other question I had too about corrections for the out-of-county rental. What percentage of this includes inmates from Will and Kane counties?
This is, it represents a total, an average as far as total. It's not, I think they're all charged the same, so it's a matter of number of beds. I don't look at who they are. At this point, they're all the same. Whether that'll change, you know, if the Fed goes up, and whether we match everybody else or not, that may become an issue. But right now, everybody's charged the same amount. So it's really, to me, it's a matter of how many beds are rented, calculation-wise.
All right.
And that's a lower average, obviously, than what is currently happening. You know, that's taken in effect, you know, an up and a down swing during the course of the year.
Just so you know, what we've tried to do in the budget process is use a conservative number so that we don't over forecast. I mean, you know, there is gonna be volatility there at times. It's gonna go up and it's gonna go down depending on things that are a little bit out of our control or out of the sheriff's control. So what we're trying to do there is use a number that we feel is very conservative there. We'd rather be over it than to come back in and not meet the target, the budget target. Any questions?
Any specific revenue questions? If not, we'll go on to the general fund expense portion. It takes those revenues and brings them over onto the top there, and then we have the departments, the information as far as 07 actuals, what their budget was year to date, and then projected. Again, this is my projections. The fact that that activity is controlled by the department heads, so obviously this could come in different. So I'm not trying to speak on anybody's behalf as far as those are concerned. Their averages, tried to look at with as much accuracy as possible to project out. That's part of the thing, one of the requirements of doing a budget. Their current 08 budget and then the 09 budget. So as you can see, for the most part, everybody's the same. The 08 to 09. There are a few exceptions, as we've discussed over the last number of months, with the considered requests and board and this committee, motions, various motions. From the last month was specifically discussed as far as the request from public defender, and then the chief judges also committed help of $50,000, and that $50,000 was adjusted from the DNDC for the chief judge, and then it was adjusted to public defender non-grant, as well as trying to match up to it was a total of $87,000, so $37,000 was also adjusted to there. So for the most part, as far as where we were at last month and balancing everybody, I believe those were the specific topics that we discussed and went back through and relooked at things. The trends seem to be pretty close here from what we looked at. So obviously with 1 month to go, obviously there's things that can still happen and unknown things, but at this point, that's where we're at. So again, taking the revenue and expense, it's balanced out. As you can see, it is a reminder to everybody from where we're at with the potential 4%, at various levels of the department, and then where we're back at level, it was adjusted in a contingency line. As you can see, the original, this year's contingency was approximately $979,000, and now we're gonna, with next year, we're gonna go to $400,000. So, that balances and helps the department heads get, bringing them back to level, but the committee and the board is gonna be very careful with new things because there's very little to adjust with that $400,000. So everybody, all the departments have to understand that they have to hit that because there's not much left. So it's, last year it seemed to be the better thing with the cut that would happen between 07 and 08 budget, but then we put more in contingency to try to balance out the what ifs or the unknowns, which we had a large amount to deal with. And then this year, with that being lower and balancing out the departments back to the same amount, it is going to be tighter. So new things have to be taken closely into consideration, as well as making sure that the budgets where they're at with the current activity, with the unknowns of the current activity, are also, balancing with the department budget. So I think just a recommendation there that definitely have to take things in consideration, before moving, considering that, that where the contingency's at this point. So this brings everything a little tighter and makes everybody really have to identify and hit those numbers specifically at their department level.
Yes, Ms. Bernard.
Thank you. How much wiggle room is in this budget then, Steve?
There's $400,000 there, and then there is, if you look on the capital development sheet, attachment A, which is the third copy, third sheet, we've always had a inmate contingency because of the activity there, and that's $379,000. So I mean, $779,000 is out of 32 million is where our wiggle room is at, so.
For next year, you mean?
For next year, that's very small percentage of the total budget, you know, which requires everybody to really make sure they do everything possible to hit what they have at this point.
And at this point, we have not spent anything on our contingency, is that correct?
Well, the contingencies, well,
Growing.
it's a budgetary adjustment. I believe, the only one we've had is the auditor, right, with their copier, we had a copier issue. You guys can remind me, I don't.
I think that's all.
So at this point, yeah, everybody seems to be, you know, where we're at there, so.
Well, I guess my concern is, Steve, is that I'm looking here, and for contingency, it shows 2008 year-to-date, nothing spent, it's blank. It says a projection of $400,000 to spend this year out of the original $979,000.
Oh, okay, yeah, let me explain that one. We did a few meetings ago, and that's 400,000. There's the corrections union budget, or union negotiation contract is up, and there's been meetings and scheduled meetings. I plugged it in there because, and I'm not trying to identify a percent or anything here, I'm just trying to throw, it's coming close to a 2-year retro at this point, depending on when that hits. So I did plug that in. What would happen is that would technically be moved to corrections budget, but I put it in a projected year end to try to identify if it happens, if it gets approved and we apply it to this year, and unidentified. So instead of averaging that into that, I averaged it right there because it may not hit this year as well, depending on the timing and the accounting rules, which would obviously throw next year off by a large amount. So that is, and I'm not trying to identify a percent or influence that legal activity right now. It's just we're trying to calculate an approximate range of what might happen if that comes through this year. So that is why that's sitting there, and that would ultimately, contingency is usually moved to the department where it happens. It's not really something that we expense individually. We identify if it has to move somewhere else.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I guess I have some concerns about this because it looks like almost every department has done an outstanding job of staying at or below budgeted amounts. But however, I'm looking at the sheriff's department, and this is probably the third, maybe fourth year in a row that this department is over budget. And the projections show that this department is probably going to be about $400,000 over budget. If I'm seeing this correctly, let's see here. No, I'm sorry. No, yeah, about $400,000 over budget. And this is not a new thing. It happens year after year after year. I also noticed that corrections again is over budget, and that's even without the contract going through. So I have some concerns because under the bottom line budget we use, I haven't seen any kind of checks or balances or any kind of way to make sure that these departments try to stay within their budgeted amount. So between looking at what the sheriff is going to be over and what corrections is going to be over, and then also I see that we're over for the juvenile detention center, that's going to eat up a huge chunk of our contingency. And I really think we need to examine it. I know we've talked about this ad nauseum, but I really think we need to go back to a line item budget. Because I'm really tired of seeing year after year after year how certain departments go hundreds of thousands of dollars over their budget with no repercussions. If I overspend, I've got a problem with my checkbook, but I don't see any kind of penalties, any kinds of reinforcement to have some departments, such as the sheriff's department, try to stay within budget, and everybody else is cut back and cut back and cut back. So many departments have tightened their belts, and we have the sheriff's department that goes spending unchecked over budget consistently year after year. I really think we need to go back to bottom line budgeting. Not bottom line, I'm sorry, line item.
As far as other identification before votes happen, I broke down the capital development worksheet, which is the attachment A. You know, I mentioned one line there, the inmate contingency, but here's the outline of the leases, bond issue leases and payments, and the National City lease is in its last year. It'll come up in August, will be the last payment, so so it's a bit of a savings there. You can see that if you run that number across that it's lower, so there's some things. We also did not do a squad lease this year, although we're working on some vans for the correction activity. There was money budgeted in the away budget for the squad lease that the sheriff volunteered not to do as well, but we do need to roll one in for next year, at least start of one for next year. So that's an outline, specific outline of the capital development, which is on the front page there of the expense budget. So that's just the detail.
Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we go too much further, I just got a question about, this too far actually falling out the Sheriff's Department. A couple months ago, we voted in a major crime task force. Do they have a budget? Are they spending any money? Are they pursuing grants? Is any of that identified? Or am I looking in the wrong spot for any information about that?
I really think the proper place is at criminal justice, Nikki, to bring that up with the sheriff in his report. I'm trying to stay in a time frame here that's reasonable to get a budget passed, and I would just refer that to the Criminal Justice Committee, and your questions are well put, well taken, but we're not prepared to answer those questions right now. The sheriff will have to answer that in criminal justice. Thank you.
The grants, just filling it, when we know about a grant or if they're current, the sheriff grants are bolded in their inset list of all the grants. But as far as my knowledge, I'm assuming that this is going to happen within the sheriff non-grant activity. I'm not aware of any grants or any other specific budgeting for that. It's not discussed. I'm not sure.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be absolutely remiss if I didn't bring to your attention. We're here to talk about a budget. And a couple of months ago, we just voted in a major crime task force, which presumably has some sort of budget attached to it, which would be, quite frankly, a fundamental integral part of this budget, what we're talking about. So, and for you to tell me to refer this to the criminal justice next month, if you will, just kind of throws me off. I just state that for the record. That's I don't get that for a minute.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Okay, hearing none.
Or do you want to vote on the general fund before we go to the special fund?
Sure.
You want to do it?
Do it separate. Okay. We're looking for a motion to pass the general fund budget. Motion by Mr. Washington, second by Mr. Kolecki. Roll call vote.
Mr. Olthoff.
Aye.
Ms. Barber. Aye. Mr. Bossert.
Aye.
Ms. Campbell.
Aye.
Mr. Kolecki.
Aye.
Mr. Legess.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mr. Scholl.
Aye.
Mr. Stopper.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Ms. Wilson.
Aye.
Mr. Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Do you want to take the special fund as a group and just go through them until we get to the end and then do it as a group? All right, then we'll do the special funds now. I guess I'll go through and just highlight some individual things, primarily probably remind everybody what we've done in the pension fund. As we get there, the first couple of pages are workforce pass-throughs. The first page is the totals as far as the grant, the funds that we pass it through, and the names of those, the big picture, and then the other page, the other two pages are a breakdown of those activities. If you're interested in knowing the programs and things that they call them, this kind of a state-related name and numerical system that we have to match up to and keep track of. But this is what passes through and what programs they pass through at a lower level. So we bring that to your attention there. There's no questions on that. We'll go to the tort fund. If there's any questions there or not. The tort fund goes up and down with some of the insurance, liabilities and exposures things that happen at a given time, you know, as that rolls through as far as, you know, the premium. So, you know, we've had a couple of years where it's had run a small deficit. We believe that next year, you know, we think, depending on if the premiums show up the way we expect and the trend, you know, that it'll actually possibly have a surplus next year. So that's a rolling, you know, thing with depending on activity and exposure related things there. So no questions, we'll continue on. We'll go to the pension fund. We've had a lot of discussion on the pension fund, and I just want to update everybody that we now have both of the ERIs paid off. There was an ERI regular and ERI SLEP to the tune of about $230,000. That will affect the percentage that we currently have in 08 to finish out 08, and then it changes our percentage for 09. And with those percentages, and as we've been adjusting property tax percentages as far as that pie that we talked about a number of months ago, we believe that it'll be real close to or balanced the pension fund for next year. So what 2010 will bring with the investments going on right now could be another story, but at least what we know about our match percentage for 09, we believe that we have it balanced at this point. So, and then you can also see the inmate housing number in the revenue. You know, you can see there that the difference in the amounts, you know, from the general fund and the corrections activity in there as far as, you know, overall totals as far as those adjustments. Any question with the pension?
Ms. Bedard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve, what is option 2 for FY09?
Because of they give us 2 options every year, and the committee voted to do option 2. We informed the IMRF it was a lower percentage, as well as we lowered it even more at the ERI because of our balances on IMRF side, because of where we're at. They give us those options, so the committee decided we took that. Again, as things roll, sometimes, you know, we may not get that option in 2010. So again, we chose to basically utilize more of our balance there, you know what I mean, which lowers our payment here or lowers our match percentage, you know what I mean, and our obligation from this end. So it's about all we can do to control, you know, what we match there to a point as far as what IMRF provides us information with. So.
Then I had another question. I see IMRF General, we're looking at expenditures of this year projection $2.9 million. And why is there almost a $500,000 drop?
That's the percentage change.
Now, is that letting us just pay this over a longer period, or, well, what does exactly this mean? I mean, are we still?
Right, they have you know, they send us, you know, our percentage of funding, you know, which is inputs and outputs and, you know, our balance there, trying to simplify this. And thus every year, depending on investments and, you know, claims, you know what I mean, and our input, that percent changes every year as far as the local match that we need to match up. And so with option 2 and having the ERIs paid down, that lowered the percentage enough, you know what I mean, that it changes it that much. I mean, it's a $500,000 shift. So whether we'll have that option for 2010 with the investments and claims and the various things, that we won't know until sometime next year as that comes together.
I just have another question, because the trend has been for several years now for the expenditures to be over the revenues, in excess of the revenues for IMRF. And I see for next year we're projecting just a balance there. Now, how long is that doable for? Because it seems to defy the trends. I mean, we've got those new pension plans where they're paying 80%.
Right, and these increases include that you're seeing from prior years. You know, that's the thing. We can only do so much on the revenue side, obviously with the property tax caps, and again the pie of our local share of who gets what of the total, and we've adjusted that again with the percents negative for 2010 with investments and the like. I mean, the percent we're paying for 09 could drastically change for 10, which would could put it back in a deficit. I mean, again, there's not much we can do as far as changing our side of the revenue, you know, what I mean, as far as the property tax. And we really, other than these options and what we did in paying down, that we don't have a whole lot of options as far as what we have to match. You know, what I mean, we have to do what they tell us, so it's, you know, and the state voted on that change, you know what I mean, and then we're obligated to pay it. I mean, that's,
And that's what I think we need to as a county do, use the CI, start lobbying the state to pass realistic pension laws, not ones that are unaffordable.
So you're saying we got a zero here for the year, right? Zero.
well, for the budget, yeah.
For the budget, and this is our.
That'll be the total fund balance, yeah.
So the one good thing is we have an ending fund balance of $2 million. Any other questions?
I don't know if you just want to flip through, like from starting at the recorder computer, these are all the computer funds, you know, it shows ins and outs and fund balances. I don't know if you really want to take a whole lot of time on this or not. Stop if you see something or have questions, or I don't know how to go. Everybody glance through it. All these are pretty straightforward and pretty consistent year to year. We could have a change depending on when the circuit clerk with the court system, you know, the update goes through the court document storage, which is 290, fund 290, and then the court automation fund, which is 230. No, I'm sorry, 270. 270, fund 270, court document storage, and then the court automation. Those fund balances could change, and we have, you know, we're budgeting in, you know, a certain amount. You know, although we don't know a specific amount, but you know, those could be used up, and that's why those large dollar amounts are in those budgets. But other than that, all the other special funds are pretty straightforward overall. At the Fund 380 to BAC, with the change we've done in property tax adjustment there, we believe we've pretty well got them close at or close to balanced. You know, depending on, you know, obviously things that show up there. You know, it could be a surplus, could be a small deficit. But I think we're in the ballpark there with those adjustments that we've made in the property tax that we've had discussions on there. So just an update, which would bring it, you know, roughly the fund balance to approximately $300,000. We're running $300,000. So it's, you know, I think we're in pretty good shape there overall. You know, if we can keep it there, because we can see how things go. Rest are just some are pass-through things. The last two, the KMEG grant and the transportation are pass-through things that we do. So I don't know if there's any other questions on any specifics.
Any other questions from the committee on the budget? I think with revenues kind of flattening off there at $32 million range, and I think the last cost of living thing seems to be 5.8% or something, we've been able to hold expenditures to the $32 million line. And it's taken the cooperation of all the department heads, and everybody has worked very hard. Many committee members have spent time with Steve. And an aside, off to the side to get comfortable with the budget numbers and where we're going. So I really think the committee's done a good job. Steve, your department's done a good job. It's pretty tough to forecast this stuff out way out front, but it's a budget is a forecast. Audits are history, but budgets are forecasts. And we're forecasting that we can balance the budget, and our contingency may not be as large as we'd like, but we'll have to deal with that if emergencies arise. So, is there Any other questions from the committee on the budget?
Sorry, Sally.
Yes, Ms. Bedard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just think, and I think the committee's done a good job, I commend them for that. However, I think we have to look, when we see certain departments that are consistently 10-20% over budget year after year after year, there's a pattern that's been established, and I think we need to look at ways to break that pattern. You can't, everybody else, you can't hold everybody to one standard and let others, a couple of other departments basically flout the rules all the time. It's inconsistent for the overall budget picture. I think it creates some feeling of discord with the other departments. But I think it's the whole thing is if we're holding everybody else accountable, all the departments need to come into line. I frankly am tired of seeing a couple of departments year after year fuming over. It's not right. So I hope that for next year's budget that we either look at again, line item budgeting, or tell these departments, hey, get in line like everyone else. Thank you.
In answer to the call from, on the line item budget, I think that the committee is pretty much, the majority of the committee pretty much has decided that we're gonna stay with bottom line budgeting. We're not gonna macromanage these departments. I think last year, when we asked the department heads, not in a mandate, but in an asking posture to reduce budgets, they responded by $440,000 worth of savings to the taxpayers of Kankakee County. So I think that the bottom line budget process that we've adopted is working very well, and I think that we, in the committee, I think the majority of the committee feels that we will continue on bottom line budgeting. The department heads have responded. They know their job, and they've cut costs where they can. This year with budget, with revenue, the revenue situation the way it is, we've not had to cut bodies. We've stayed within a budget framework that is responsible. And I might add that next, at our budget meeting next week, we'll be discussing the levy. And I think we're gonna hold the line on the levy. So that's the plan at this point. So I need a motion to pass the special fund budget. Mr. Washington, you got a comment?
Well,
Steve,
we have highway, we have highway, we also have animal control. Do you want to include them all in the same, or do you want to do those?
Let's include them all.
Yes, they're
Is that
special
okay
funds.
with you, Mr.
They're,
Washington?
I have them sectioned different. I was just sitting there thinking about that, sorry. That's fine.
We have a motion by Mr. Washington and a second by Ms. Wilson, okay? And we'll have a roll call. Yeah, question, Steve?
Did you want to include highway and animal control with the special
Yeah,
funds?
Right.
included.
Did you want to go over it, or you good, or before they go there?
It's self-explanatory. It's, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just didn't make it through there.
Does it-
I can go back through it, or, if you just want to include them, it's up to you guys.
We have a motion and a second to
Sorry, it was,
include.
okay, all right,
Sorry.
I just, sorry about
Okay, we have a roll call vote on the rest of the budget.
Ms. Farmer? Mr. Bossert?
Aye.
Ms. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. Colecki?
Aye.
Mr. Legess?
Aye.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Scholl?
Aye.
Mr. Stoppenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
it. Aye.
Ms. Wilson? Aye. Mr. Cruz?
Aye.
Mr. Vickery?
Aye, motion carries.
We can have it.
Yeah,
Might
we'll
have
have a
to do it like
discussion on
December,
that.
or,
As you know, why, that's why.
there's something, there's something in the statute.
To clarify that point, we'll have a discussion on the levy.
Not sure, yeah, if they both, I don't think they both can end up at the same full board meeting. There's something in the statute that separates budget and the levy, so we'll have to make sure we identify that, but we can certainly discuss it, discuss, you know, the percentages and the things that go into that.
Is there any old business to come before the committee? Ms. Bedard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify the record on bottom line budgeting, because I see that animal control has a line item budget. So I get more accountability out of the dog pound than I do out of the sheriff's department, who has been consistently over budget. And the problem with bottom line budgets is, again, they don't have any restrictions. And what this board is going to do is what they've done year after year after year, and go back and backfill in their budget, so it comes out balanced in the end. And again, it's there, you know, to me, a bottom line budget presents a free-for-all for some departments. I think it lessens accountability, because right now, you're gonna get more accountability out of the dog pound than you will out of the sheriff's office.
Thank you. Is there any old business, Mr. Boswell?
On that point, I noticed animal control is $28,000 over budget, so.
That's at least they itemized it. They're itemized. They have itemized it.
Do we want to go to bottom line?
8,000 is a far cry from 400,000 year after year after year.
10% of their budget.
Is there any old business?
Well, it's a far cry.
If there's none, is there any new business to come before the committee today? Is there any new business, Mr. Legess?
Are we gonna get a presentation today by the sheriff on what was discussed in the criminal justice about expansion? Is that
It's not on the agenda.
Oh, it's
but
not coming up.
we can put it on the agenda for next finance. if
Yeah,
you'd
I'd like to know more about
That's
that.
not a problem.
And also, if someone could expand, because I'm sure we're all gonna get questions, and it's the first I knew about it was what I heard on the radio about the $16 million building project.
I think we're all, I think we all read about it or heard about it.
Nobody knows about it?
Mr. Cruz would like to enlighten us.
Oh, wow.
I knew you were involved. You're going out and spending $16 million.
I will say, I think this is from the Kankakee Development Corporation's idea of what they would like the downtown Kankakee area to look like. And this is just their idea of what they would like county government to be doing with this building and the administration center. So it's nothing that's come from any committee that we've had. It's nothing that's come from county government. This is what the Downtown Development Corporation would like to see. And I would really kind of tend to believe that everyone on the county board feels that the courthouse is still the top priority, more so than what this building is. So I think it's a great idea. I think, you know, they're doing their job, and that's planning for downtown Kankakee, but we also have to do ours. So that's where I believe that came from.
Thank you. Is there any other new business that comes before the committee? Hearing none. Motion to adjourn is in order. Mr. Galecki with a motion to adjourn. Mr. Joel with a second. All in favor, signify
Oh,
by
I
saying
have
aye.
one question.
Go right ahead.
Do we have enough money in the budget to buy Bob some razor blades?
We can put that on the finance agenda. for
Could that
next
be
week
in a
if you
special
like.
fund?
Too late.
Meeting is adjourned.
Hey, Bob.